my God, a miracle happened. A free agent signed.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all the Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I'm about to start my 6th season here as a host on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been a podcaster for decades. I've done all sorts of crazy stuff. If you don't know who I am by now, what are you going to do? And you can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, on an Instagram. You can follow me. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. For those of you who are subscribed to the YouTube channel and are following us every day, when you leave your messages there, make sure to include that hashtag EverydaySully so I have an idea who is following us each and every day. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockon to get started. By the way, I'm recording this one on the same day that I recorded the one about the Pirates pitching staff. That one just dropped, so no one got the trivia question yet, but I will repeat it at the end of this episode for those of you who heard it. By the way, I recorded that episode because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get my guest on today. I want to make sure at least I had one in the can. But now, instead of being behind, I'm going to be ahead. I want to talk to this guy for a couple of days and said, hey, let's get on. Let's get this recorded. It's friend of the podcast. Hey, it's Ben Kaspick from Locked On San Francisco Giants. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great because, like you said, that free agent who signed with my team. So,
well, before we get started, where can people follow you?
At Ben Kaspick on Twitter. I'm pretty darn active there, especially when stuff is happening. It was relatively quiet, to put it mildly, for quite a few months. And then, of course, the show is Locked On Giants, your team every day, 5 days a week on all podcast platforms and YouTube as well.
Now, I want to make sure that no one clicks on the New York Giants football.
No.
So you have Locked On Giants.
No, I do not. They got it. So the Twitter account, well, on YouTube, I'm Locked On SF Giants, like the little @ handle. And then on podcast platforms, it's Locked On San Francisco Giants. I honestly, I should know this.
Look it up. You should probably. If only we knew someone involved in the show. I was trying to. Yeah.
The colors are orange and black, not blue and red or whatever.
Okay. All right. I was trying to help the other. Okay,
sorry.
Great.
Yeah, I know.
He's new here. You've only been how many years? How many years have you been here?
Only 5.
Only 5 years. Yeah. You've been here a presidential term. Hey, but Ben, this has been an interesting off season for the San Francisco Giants. You've been on the show in this off season because they keep making moves. Their latest move was signing of Matt Chapman. And before we go through some of the moves that I think they should continue making, let's break down a little bit of why this is a significant move and what this means for the Giants moving into what should be an exciting 2024 season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Matt Chapman, one of the Giants' biggest problems over the last couple seasons that have been disappointing, 81 wins followed by 79, has been problems on defense. And, you know, you were looking at going into the season with J.D. Davis as your starting third baseman, and all due respect to J.D. Davis, like, he's notoriously not been a great defender, although he did really actually improve last year. But Matt Chapman is Matt Chapman. I think, you know, he provides that consistent, excellent defense. He commands the respect. He has the respect of all the players around the league who know what he can do. He has a lot of power. He's an everyday player. As we know, the Giants have done a lot of platooning and mixing and matching, and I think they're trying to move away from that to a significant degree. Not to say that they're going to completely get rid of it, but, you know, Chapman is not a platoon player. He's the guy who's going to be in there each and every day for the most part. And the offense has kind of been inconsistent at times, but he's someone who doesn't chase outside the zone, has a lot of power. If you look at some of the kind of StatCast type metrics, he does really well in those, like hard hit rate, barrel percentage. And he's one of the rare guys who, if you look at his, you can see like how many home runs would he have hit if he played all of his games at Oracle Park. And over the last 4 years, since they moved in the fences to accommodate the bullpens that they added out in center field, he would have actually added 14 home runs to what he compared to what he actually hit. And that accounts for stuff like environmental effects. And so he might be just a good fit for the ballpark. Hits a lot of balls to center field in the air, and that's actually a good spot. It's very shallow. It's the shallowest center field in all of baseball at 391 to dead center. So you get the defense. He's surprisingly fast, which I didn't really know until I kind of dug into this. Like 80th percentile sprint speed, good base runner, just culturally, I think brings respectability to this team that was kind of a mix and match, cast off kind of type team.
And his connection with Bob Melvin,
yeah,
his days with the A's, and we'll get to managerial connections there. But to me, he'd been rumored for a couple months to be signing with San Francisco, and there's been kind of like swirling around. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? To me, I think the moment that the Giants said, "What the heck are we doing? Let's just sign Chapman," is bringing back Pablo Sandoval. Now, look I love Panda. Even though I'm a Red Sox fan, I've forgiven him for the Red Sox debacle. Obviously, oof. Panda, yeah, that was I knew that was going to be a disaster, and I was telling no, don't do it. But obviously, Giant fans have, he spent 11 plus seasons with the Giants and was 3 World Series rings, MVP on one of them. And huge hits obviously in the series against Kansas City and that series against Detroit. It's a wonderful sort of little throwback. Bring back the Panda hats. Come on, he was washed up in 2020. He hasn't played since 2021, and he was not good then.
No, but he's. I mean, the old cliche, best shape of his life. He does look really good physically, which was not always the case, as those Boston fans can attest to. There were some issues with a belt exploding, etc.
I'll just say this is an actual true stat. It sounds like I'm making it up, but in 2016, Sandoval, for the entire season, a year where the Red Sox went to the playoffs, Sandoval had more broken belts than he had hits. He had 1 broken belt, and he went 0 for 6 in the field, and had an on-base percentage of 143 because he did draw 1 walk. Not good. Not good.
Yeah. So bringing him back, I mean, he just wants to keep playing. He's 37. He wasn't good since he hasn't played since 2021, like you said, and he was really bad. And I mean, he's gone on to play in Dubai professionally. He's played in Mexico professionally. So he just loves the game. And this was all coming out around the same time that Anthony Rendon was kind of complaining and saying he just basically doesn't like baseball, which is kind of how I read those comments. And it just was a stark comparison to a guy like Pablo, who comes on a minor league deal and says, "I'm willing to go to AAA." I don't.
Good for him.
Yeah, so they send him to AAA or whatever, but you also got guys who probably should be playing ahead of him in AAA, like Casey Schmidt, who need you need real future pieces to be developing down there. So yeah, I mean, JD Davis I think is an okay plan at third, but Matt Chapman is just a clear upgrade, and it was a no-brainer move. It did drag on, but at the end of the day, the contract, 3 years, $54 million with a couple opt-outs in there. And there's actually a 4th-year mutual option, which wasn't previously reported, and we just learned about today. It looks like a bargain kind of signing for the San Francisco Giants.
Hey, fans of daily fantasy sports, do I have a place for you? PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. This isn't you playing thousands of other players. You can pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. Football season is over, but the action on the floor is heating up. With college basketball taking over the next month, there's no shortage of high-stake tournaments. Turn your hoops knowledge into some serious cash. You want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like Meek Hill or Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries of some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. I'm going to play this week, and I expect Devin Booker to give me more than 30 points and Jason Tatum of my Celtics to pull down 10 rebounds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a deposit match up to $100. Once again, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more. Pick less. You know what? It's that easy. Locked On has created the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. You mentioned J.D. Davis. J.D. Davis now gives them some depth if they don't flip him for another reliever or whatnot. But let's just take a quick peek here because the Giants, I mean, we're not going to only talk about the Giants here, folks. We're going to talk a little bit about the NL West in general and the wild card chase in general. But you'll forget that the Giants brought in Jung-Hoo Lee. They brought in Jorge Soler. Now they brought in Chapman. And they've brought in Bob Melvin. I mean, they brought in Pop to this team. They've brought in some strong bats, and they brought in one of the best managers in the game who manages, I'd like to point out, brought a team with a negative run differential to the NLCS in Arizona, kept bringing the A's to the postseason, even though they have a lower budget than the Locked On Podcast Network, and took the San Diego Padres to within 3 wins of the World Series a couple of years ago. I think this is a step in the right direction for the Menlo Atherton graduate, native of Palo Alto, California. However, there are issues in the pitching staff, and one of which they brought in one past Hall of Famer, Robbie Ray, who's currently on the 60-day disabled list. They brought in Jordan Hicks to pitch in the rotation, even though he's primarily a reliever. Obviously, they have Logan Webb. But Blake Snell is floating out there, who, by the way, earned a Cy Young Award pitching for Bob Melvin. And it's clear that, games are starting in a couple of weeks. So as much as unfair as it is to Blake Snell that he gets to win the Cy Young Award, tries to cash in as free agency, the market, I don't think it has anything to do with collusion. I think people are afraid of a long-term deal of a pitcher his age who's had 2 brilliant seasons, but isn't Roy Halladay. The Giants, I think, should take advantage of that, the way they took advantage of Chapman, and get that arm to give them that depth.
150%. Sully. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't possibly agree more. I've been screaming about it on my show. Like, one of the things I've been saying for a month or two is, like, we had the Boris 4, right? And I was saying they not only need one of these guys, I think they need 2 of these guys. And I said a pitcher and a position player. And Chapman made more sense than Bellinger.
Yes.
They got their center fielder already in Jung-Hoo Lee, as you mentioned. He loses defensive value as a first baseman because center field, more important, more important position, I would argue, and the numbers would back it up. But the 2 pitchers remain on the market. And Blake Snell, for me, is the guy I prefer. I like that. I mean, he's been absolutely dominant, like dating back to a certain point in 2022. And he started out 2023 poorly, but then went on a historic run of like 16 starts in which he had an ERA under 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
So the potential to just absolutely dominate is always what I lean towards, as opposed to, you look at Jordan Montgomery, very good pitcher. But a couple years ago, he was traded straight up for Harrison Bader. He hasn't always.
To be fair, that was a terrible trade, and people were screaming that it was a terrible trade as it happened. That trade never made any sense to me.
Very odd.
And they've been struggling to get that pitching. Although the pitching wasn't the problem with the Yankees, they've missed Jordan Montgomery big time.
Yeah, and fair. But at the same time, you look at the strikeout rate for Montgomery, it's actually below league average. And if you look at the strikeout rate for Snell, you're talking one of the highest in the game. Now, the same can be said of the walk rate. Snell's walk rate is like the highest, if not one of the highest in the game. But he's either letting people on base via the walk, or he's striking them out for the most part. He can just absolutely dominate. And I think of a postseason series, and this is a Giants team that's going to get Robbie Ray, 2021 Cy Young Award winner, back. Logan Webb is capable of winning a Cy Young Award. He finished second last year to Blake Snell. You could literally have number 1 and number 2 Cy Young NL finishers in your rotation tomorrow. If you just go out and sign this guy. And Giants have had injuries. They have some intriguing young arms. Kyle Harrison is considered by many the top left-handed pitching prospect in baseball, and he made it up to the bigs at the end of the last year, and showed flashes of excellence, and has ace potential, and so he factors into that rotation. But beyond Webb and Harrison, and then Hicks is kind of an unknown because, like you said, he's been a reliever almost exclusively. You're looking at just uncertainty, and they've had injuries. Tristan Beck was supposed to be in this rotation. He had an upper arm aneurysm that he's having surgery on tomorrow, and wishing him the best with that. And Keaton Wynn supposed to be in this rotation, dealing with elbow soreness, but has been cleared.
I didn't know. Is he gonna have surgery or no?
No. So he's had MRI was clean, and doctors have kind of cleared him to resume throwing and all that stuff. But it's still just a reminder that you're looking at basically Logan Webb and then a bunch of question marks. Guys with upside, like Jordan Hicks throws 105-mile-an-hour sinkers, and Kyle Harrison has that pedigree as a prospect, but it's still unknowns. And then when you look beyond those guys, it's really unknowns. They claim to be very high on these young pitchers, and there's a lot of them. There's depth behind even the guys I've mentioned in the minors, in the upper minors, guys who they think are ready. But come on, we're talking about Blake Snell. He won the Cy Young Award.
Well, and think about this for a second. You have Snell and Webb. You could have 1 and 2 from the Cy Young Award in the black and orange, okay? You have Robbie Ray, who has won a Cy Young Award. You have Alex Cobb, who's had a fine career, okay? Now, there's beyond just their talent, how they can do there. You have a Kyle Harrison, who you are thinking, okay, could this be our next big left-handed starter we have? And you surround them with veterans who have not only been there, done that, but there are 3 Cy Young Awards that have been won there, and Logan Webb.
Right.
You have the right environment for having he's the Nuke LaLoosh, and you've got a bunch of Crash Davises around them. People who listen to the show know that I mention this all the time, but I got to think that the addition of the veteran Charlie Liebrandt to the Braves team in the 90s helped the Glavins and the Smoltzes and the Averys fall into their position. This is now all it takes a village to raise an ace. But if you look up and you say, hey, having Kyle Harrison be our 3 or 4 starter instead of saying you're the ace may be the very thing that allows him to ease in his position. Mm-hmm. Remember, Bumgarner was the number 4 starter when they won the World Series in 2010. They had Lincecum, they had Kane, they had Jonathan Sanchez, and then they had Bumgarner, who I think was 4 years old when they went to the World Series that year. He was just a toddler. But same thing, Harrison is 23 years old, 22 years old, San Jose native, left-handed pitcher, has all the talent in the world. You put him in the rotation and you say, you don't have to be the stud. Learn from the best. Right
now, he's the number 2 starter, when you look at kind of people projecting the rotation. And I agree, because Cobb and Ray are on the injured list, it could be Jordan Hicks, I suppose, but he's also inexperienced, and that's a lot of pressure. And I I just kind of don't buy that they're going to go into and that's just,
You
we're talking
can't.
about the top three or top, number 2 and 3. But then when you start looking at 4 and 5, it's just one more guy. And then like the young pitchers can have their chance early in the
Right.
season because Ray and Cobb are going to miss significant time. So it just makes too much sense. It doesn't have, I guess it could be Montgomery, and he doesn't come with the qualifying offer rejection stuff because he didn't.
I think.
So
Well, look at. I think what could happen in the long term in terms of developing an ace is worth the qualifying pick and worth that.
you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and for good reason. Because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And it doesn't have to be your team, Sully. Like, this is my kind of secret that I say is like, if it's a $5 bet or more that wins, you get 150 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/lockedon. So you can literally just look, checking out the NBA games for who is the most heavy favorite. Like, look for the best odds you can find and place a $5 bet. And if that bet wins, you get 150 in bonus bets. And you can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon. Again, fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
One more time to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on the YouTubes. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local extras of Locked On plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, we all know that the National League wild card is going to be a scrum. It's always a scrum, and we've seen the importance of getting into that scrum with the last bunch of National League champions. And that's dating back to the Nats getting in, the Braves winning the division with less than 90 wins, and the last two booby prize, congratulations for even showing up. The Phillies and the Diamondbacks say, oh, we'll show up all the way to the World Series. We see the importance of just punching the ticket. I think having a pitching staff where more often than not you're throwing a reliable starter or even just an okay starter is going to be the difference between a win here and a win there. What do you think the Giants' chances are, and what is the biggest thing you're worried about?
The Giants' chances as they currently stand, I think they're missing that piece in the starting rotation. I think that it's just a sketchy rotation after Logan Webb, even though I like a lot of those guys. If you're relying on, like we just said, if you're relying on a young pitcher to be your number 2 starter, and then your number 3 starter is a guy who's made like 8 career starts, even though he's got a lot of big league time. And then number 4 and 5 are kind of up in the air, with your number 5 going down with the arm aneurysm, which is possibly going to cost him like 5+ months because it's a pretty complicated recovery. And so I just think right now, as constructed, they've done so much to improve themselves, but it feels incomplete still. It feels like they're one piece incomplete. And I would argue actually that like adding a Michael Lorenzen or something like that isn't what this team should do, because I think that the young guys they have probably could perform at least at that level. They really are high, not just Kyle Harrison, and not just Keaton Wynn, but guys behind that as well. And so it's either like the best or go with the young guys. But if they go with the young guys, I feel insecure about their chances day in and day out, because you might be, I mean, these young pitchers are, they don't eat up innings either, right? You kind of baby them along. And so then you're taxing your bullpen. On the offensive side, they're pretty much set, except at the shortstop position, where there's, Brandon Crawford is a St. Louis Cardinal, which is super odd and weird. And there was an article written, and he basically was just like, he laid it all out there and said they didn't want me back. and it was kind of tough to read. But at the same time, like the last 2 years, he was really bad. And
Yeah.
so, but then they turned. It's kind of like similar to Kyle Harrison. They've got a prospect in Marco Luciano, who, like, we don't know what you're going to get there. And so they bring in Nick Ahmed, who's a notoriously great defender on a minor league deal. I think that he has a good chance of making that team. And then suddenly
Yeah.
you've got Chapman and Ahmed on the left side, and that could be an excellent defense. Tyro Estrada had an excellent defensive season. So I really, really like the offseason they've had, including bringing in Bob Melvin that's a big part of it too. But as they stand now, I still just feel really insecure about that pitching staff and maybe the kind of softer part of the bullpen, and the shortstop position is a little bit of a question mark as well.
All right, now I know you're going to hate that I'm going to say this, but I think you got to give the Dodgers the division.
Yeah.
The Dodgers win the division. Okay. I think the Braves are going to win the East.
Yep.
I think only one playoff team's coming out of the Central.
Yep.
I'm right now picking the Cubs, but every team in the Central could make a run of it or lose 93 games. I mean, that's the delta there is. But I don't see anyone in that division winning 90 games, even Chicago. Okay, so that means you have 3 wild card spots. I think Philadelphia is going to take one of them. I think they're really talented. I love what Arizona did, bringing in Eduardo Rodriguez. They have a ton of young talent on that team that gelled when they went to the World Series. I think their Gallen is really good. Fat is going to be really good. As their number 3 starter. Kelly, I think they have a 4-man rotation that I think might be better than Los Angeles's. That's why I think the Diamondbacks have a shot at 90 wins. So that means there's one wildcard spot that I think is really up for grabs. The Giants. I mean, the Marlins will probably take a step back. The Brewers are probably going to take a step back. But which wildcard team, other than the Giants, do you think they're going to be? Who do you think the Giants are going to be battling for that final spot?
The one thing I'll say before I give my prediction is that it's always so hard to predict, and then there's always some random team that overperformed, like the Marlins.
The Marlins did, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, none of us were talking about them they maybe some people talking about them, but we didn't see that exactly coming.
I picked them. I picked them to go to the playoffs last year.
Well,
you can look it up.
I believe you. How about the Reds, though? I mean, not like people expected the Reds probably to lose close to 100 games, and they were very competitive, and all this young talent shows up, and I think we kind of saw the Diamondbacks coming, but we didn't see the Padres falling apart, and so that opens up a spot because the Padres fell apart, and suddenly there's another spot that's open and available for teams. So I think I wouldn't rule out the Padres at all, even though they've taken some steps back talent-wise. I think that they still have enough talent. I mean, you look at Tatis and Machado and Ha-Sung Kim and Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish. They've got some guys and that they could easily play better. They were so bad in extra inning games, 1-run games. They could easily just, like you said with the Marlins, but in reverse, kind of take a step forward just for a little mean regression. Other than that, I think the Reds could be a factor for sure again. And I think the Mets could be a factor, although they lost Kodai Senga, and I think he's going to miss significant time, and that's a big deal. But other than that, I mean, the Giants are right in the thick of that conversation. I would put them right in the middle of that mix and it seems like they're always in that position. But if you add a Blake Snell, I think it pushes them into a more concrete, where you're talking about the Phillies and you're talking about the D-backs. I think you're also then talking about the Giants in that same kind of echelon, where you're a little bit of a step ahead of some of these other teams in that scrum.
Just don't lose dumb games. That's all you got to do, is don't lose the dumb games.
Yeah.
And I think you're gonna have 3 teams battling for 2 spots, and I think they're going to be in the West. You're going to have the Padres, the Diamondbacks, and the Giants are going to be battling for 2 spots. I think it's going to be a really, really fun season. Hey, Ben Kaspick. Oh, by the way, the trivia question that I'm repeating for right now, for those who didn't hear the Sunday show, who was the last Pittsburgh Pirate to receive a single first-place vote in the Cy Young ballot.
Hmm.
The last one to get a first place vote in the Cy Young. I'm not saying the last one to win. The last time someone said, you know what, I think this Pirate should win the Cy Young Award. Let me just fill out that ballot. That's a trivia question. Put it down here at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, Instagram, or the YouTube account. Ben Kaspick, where can they follow you? Have you figured it out yet?
I don't know.
Okay, well, let's look it up. I'll put a link out. Follow Sully Baseball or Locked On MLB, and we'll put a link on there, and maybe then Ben Kaspick will make a mental note of it. Hey, see you a couple later on this week when they sign Blake Snell.
All right.
Talking about the Giants and the inevitable West Scrum in the wild card. This has been a Locked On MLB, Locked On San Francisco Giants crossover. He's Ben Kaspick. I'm Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.